Hi there, I'm Dr. Roger Landry, and welcome to We're All in This Together. And I think we know more and more that we are. However, we're also finding that it seems as if some people are heading in a different direction than others, and maybe we're not all in this together. And we're seeing some very animated responses to issues like masks and whether you wear them or not, and whether we should shut down the economy for a very small section of our population. And so you've probably either had some animated conversations or saw some animated conversations. And so really what's going on here? Well, as I'm want to say, and that most of what we see in our human behavior goes way back. We've been on Earth for however long, eons, and our behavior for most of that time, our lifestyle for most of that time was quite different than it is today. And so therefore, sometimes we don't understand why we're behaving in a certain way, and yet it makes perfect sense with our human experience. So when we were threatened, our life was threatened by a lion, we responded with a certain aspect of our brain, the amygdala, called the fear center. And basically that made us that attached to other parts of our body, where we would get our cortisol and our endorphins and our epinephrine, everything going so that we could either fight or flight or freeze, but to save ourselves. And it was all or none. We had to bring all hands on deck in order to save ourselves from this physical threat. Well, it turns out that it's not just a physical threat, it's also an intellectual threat. What do I mean by that? Well, we're all different. We all had different experiences. You could almost say that there are 8 billion plus different people on this earth. They are different people, but totally different in their makeup, even though there are a lot of similarities. But we develop, because of our upbringing, our experiences, core beliefs that are very like foundations of who we are. Like we have a house and we put it on a foundation, and it's on these core beliefs. And if those core beliefs are threatened, or we feel they're threatened, even if they're not truly, we react pretty much the same way. It's all hands on deck. It's a strong response. It's animated. And we feel that our very survival, even though it may not be at a conscious level, but our very survival is depending upon us resisting this threat, protecting our core beliefs. So that's really what's behind a lot of what we might be seeing. And we need to discuss this further and what we can do about it, don't you think? And by the way, of course, you all know, you've been here before, but I'm with my colleagues, Danielle and Teresa, and we do a podcast called The Bright Side of Longevity, and we're bringing all these skills to bear on this particular situation. So what do you think? How do we manage this? How do we understand this and manage this? Okay. Danielle?
Yeah, I like what you said about core beliefs, because I mean, that's from the time when we were children, how we think of ourselves, how we view the world, and how we view each other. You know, so did you grow up thinking that the world is unsafe or safe, to trust somebody or not trust somebody? Am I a good person or am I a terrible person? And those things are really rigid and hard to unwrap, which kind of gets to my next point. There is a lot out there that's either accurate and some not so accurate sources. And unfortunately, when we have so much access to social media, we don't always know where things are coming from, if they're true, what's true and what's right or not. So I was going to offer one tip as far as when you do see these things online that kind of you're not sure about, check the source. You know, if it's coming from angry guy who hates everybody is their social media handle, I would question the source, versus if it comes from Harvard Business Review or, you know, usually a .gov, a .edu, an academic or medical source. If it's a business, you might want to ask, okay, well, what's their purpose of their business? Are they slanted in a certain way for a reason? So just to use a little bit of discernment when you're actually scrolling and gathering your ammunition for your next argument. And the second thing, knowing that we have those core beliefs, we don't have a choice. It as far as it comes in, there's an emotional reaction before there's an intellectual reaction. That's just physiology. But what we can do is pause. you can still feel that anger or whatever that reaction is, but you don't have to react. You can take a deep breath, calm down, and then address it from a more positive perspective. For some people, that might be taking a few breaths. For some people, they need to leave the conversation and come back later. So it's just a question of kind of knowing yourself and knowing how you're feeling. And if your mind is racing and you're all jittery, that might not be the time to engage in any kind of discussion.
Yeah, for sure.
And finally, I would say give yourself permission to start to challenge yourself very gently. So you don't have to say, I'm right, you're wrong. You can say, well, what else might be true? Could we both be right? Is there, because when you ask those questions, you're opening up the conversation to not necessarily agree with somebody, but to understand where they're coming from. And that just makes for healthier communication overall.
That's good points, Danielle. We have to be two things, I think, really good at listening and genuinely curious about what other people think and why they believe what they do. And we think about our society, I don't know how many really good listeners are in our lives. I don't think we're that great at listening. And when it comes to people who disagree with us, we're not good about being genuinely curious in general. We get, I think, so committed to our opinion that people who disagree with us can't even hear our opinion. And we don't want to understand them, but we want them to understand us because we think we're right. Here's a really interesting question. Deep down, there's something that we believe that makes it hard for us to hear someone else's ideas about what they believe. Like, why? Isn't that an interesting question? Why is that uncomfortable?
I know what you mean, and I know my personal trigger is when I feel like it's mean-spirited about somebody else. Like, I believe this, and you're a moron if you think differently. So when there's some attitude attached to it, or when it's harmful to somebody, either verbally abusive or physically abusive, I think that's when I know that's when I get my I can't hear this reaction.
Right.
I think a major point of contention in times like this is that there are many people who are just programmed. Their core belief is the greater good. I know that my parents, my education was all about the greater good. It's that period I was raised. And yet people who were raised after that, or not all, but some, that life was a competition, that it was dog eat dog. And you couldn't be concerned about the greater good, or else they would roll over you. And that they feel that is the basic thing. And that is grounds for what we're seeing now. And it's just, once again, your core beliefs that were developed over time through education, experience, parents, and all that. And it's deeply, deeply rooted. And so I think it's just a matter of, as always, things are a whole lot better if you have true communication between people. At least try to understand. You don't have to buy into it, right? You don't have to say you're right. I changed my mind. That doesn't happen. It's probably not. But to just understand that this person isn't as irrational or as mean as you really thought when you really hear why they feel the way they do.
That's so true. I think sometimes we want to eliminate other people's voices so that we don't get upset, right? As if we are a victim of their opinion. And that's not necessarily true. If we listen and really hear them and allow them that space to speak whatever, is true for them, it doesn't mean that we're agreeing with them, and it doesn't mean that we're consenting. We're just truly listening from a place, of curiosity. And I think, to your point, Danielle, maybe we don't want to listen to others in an effort to stamp out those voices of hate and fear, but we also doesn't work to hate the haters, and it doesn't work to judge those who are judging. It is well intended, but we can never fight hate with hate, and we can never fight judgment with judgment. We can disagree with people and still love them and still make room for their thoughts. We can try to understand what's true for them rather than focusing on what we believe. It's fine to say, if you don't believe the same as me, It's not fine to say, if you don't believe the same as me, I don't want to hear your ideas. It's so much easier to love people when we understand them. And understanding them isn't about convincing them, of our agenda.
Not at all.
Truly about understanding.
So as we see some of the very animated interactions that we see on TV and out there, and we feel ourselves getting all turned up, I think it's about realizing where all this is coming from. It's deep-rooted evolutionarily. It's about core beliefs where everyone is different depending upon their experiences, and those core beliefs are very important to all of us. And when they're felt under threat, this is the sort of thing that we happen, this kind of butting heads. So if we, as we've alluded to, if I could really summarize, I think it's about understanding about this, where this comes from, understanding that it's natural and physiologic. And it's basic to who we are as humans, that if we treat each other with respect, if we truly listen to others, take a breath when we want to blow up, and then listen to what they have to say, and maintain that respect, and realize that you're going to walk away from each other not convinced that the other one is right, probably not, absolutely not, but understanding a little more that you understand why that person feels that way, and that you're not going to be able to probably change those core values, but at least you understand, and you can deal with each other on with respect and on a human level, and without injuring yourself with this stress and this anger, which only hurts you and the world around you. And so if we have anything to offer, I think this is a good one. I think we should do a podcast about this. What do you think? Because this is so basic to how we interact with each other and how we stay healthy and the quality of our lives. We promise to do that. Well, great. Let's take that breath now. I'm always amazed at how much better I feel. One little breath, and when I'm heating up, all the more. So thank you, ladies. Always a pleasure. I learned a lot today. Thank you all for listening. Bye now.